the program was full. The program was full, so we've actually expanded the cap a little bit. So there, if you tried to sign up before and there weren't any spaces, there are spaces, very few spaces available now. So we upped the cap just by a couple. And then the next program we have in March is one that Tessa's going to be heading up, that I'm sure she's going to talk about during this week, but this is going to be a program, first of its kind, where we're going to be documenting standing structures on the property. We're really excited about that program. And we're hoping that it's such a big success that we can have it twice in 2023. So sign up for that program at the end of March. We also have some of our regular DIG programs in April and in May, but one other program I want to call out attention to is the second weekend in April, so the 13th through the 15th. We have a really special program happening. It's just 3 days, but it's going to be a really amazing experience working with Jerome Bias to learn about hearth cooking. So you will be not only learning about how and doing cooking, chopping, stoking the fire, doing all of that kind of stuff, but you're going to be learning about how food, cooking, chefs, foodways, all of these things, the history of that at Montpelier, the connections to the landscape, the connections to seasonality, what is being grown, what was being raised, what was being hunted, what was available to eat. You're also going to get to eat during the whole program, because not only are you going to do the cooking, you're going to be able to eat what you make. And some of the dishes you're going to be making are going to be sort of traditional dishes made by enslaved people for enslaved people, and some are going to be more like what enslaved people made for the Madisons. So, and it looks like that program is going to be a really exciting time on the property, that we're building up a whole bunch of really exciting experiences for the public at large around that program that you get to deep dive in for 3 days. So take a look at the 2023 calendar. We have all the dates up through October of 2023. Get yourself registered. There's discounts available if you're registering for fall, but pay special attention to those new programs that we have, those specialized programs or the once a year programs, because I think they're just going to be such a unique experience here at Montpelier. And now
I put the link in the chat for the for all the programs, so you can click on that in the chat.
Great.
And we've updated that.
Yes. So yeah. So I'm done with my plug. So thank you for entertaining it. And I'll turn it over to, I guess, to Matt, so he can introduce Tessa.
Oh my gosh, I forgot all about it. Hold on. Let me send.
Yeah, go muting people here. All right. Well, yeah, we're thrilled to have Tessa talk about some of the work she's been doing over the past 2 years. Tessa has a degree in historic preservation from Mary Washington. Grew up running around barns and later recording them, and so has a lot of experience and a lot of passion for historic preservation. And Tessa is going to be talking about the work she's doing, but she's leading the work on bringing all of the restoration data into a geodatabase environment. And Tessa is going to talk about what that is and the work that she's doing. So basically what Tessa's become over the last 2 years is the expert on the restoration, and is starting to extend that expertise to the architecture all across the property. And that's where, like Mary mentioned, really excited for the have Tessa start a whole new program on recording buildings. And as you all know, on the property, we've got over 100 structures, a lot of which are in desperate need of recordation before they, Mother Nature takes them over even more. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Tessa, and you can go ahead and share your screen. I think we tried that before. So thanks, Tessa.
Perfect. Well, thank you everybody for coming, and happy holidays. I'm glad that y'all want to spend your hour lunch here with me, learning about what I do. So let's see here. Matt, can you see my screen? Okay, cool. So let's see here. Let me get some of this stuff out of the way. So today I'll be talking about our work to use 3D technology to create a digital archive for all our architectural legacy data here at Montpelier. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about what exactly historic preservation is and what it is that I do and what the preservation department does. So to me, historic preservation is advocating for the use and retention of historic structures. So this includes documentation, making sure that our buildings are not falling down, or if they are falling down, recording them, condition assessments, all those types of things that go into preserving a historic structure. Now, this does not mean that I think that every structure needs to be restored to a certain point, or, you know, not like the main house where we restored it to 1812, but it's more advocating for continual use and maintenance of historic structures. So using them for things and making sure that they're not falling down, because historic structures really relates to our cultural landscape, and our cultural landscape relates to our identity and our heritage. And having a shared past that we can see across our landscape really brings people together. And it kind of tells us about our own identity and our own heritage, as we're all very connected to that, even if we don't realize it. And losing our built environment can be very detrimental to how we see our heritage and our past when we can no longer see it visibly on the landscape. So it's very, very important that these buildings are documented and continue to be used. So this kind of brings me into my talk on what is digital preservation. So digital preservation kind of adds this new level of documentation to our standard practices in preservation. It's kind of this new frontier in the preservation field. So typical standard documentation is what we call HABS level documentation. It is usually a photography and measured drawings of structures. And that is mostly just 2D representations, where when you come into 3D modeling, it gives this whole new sense of space and size that you can't really understand from a drawing or from photography. And it also allows for buildings to be reconstructed on their landscape, which is another thing that you can't really do with measured drawings or photography, is really see how it interacts with the topography around it, or how it relates to other buildings around it. Once you put it on that digital landscape, you get a much better sense of that environment. So for example, this top image right here is done through a software called Agisoft, and how it works is you take a bunch of different photos of the building, lots and lots of photos of every side, every angle, and then you plug it into the software, and then the software actually ties the photos together through what we call key points. The software can recognize like the same point in multiple photos, and then they can tie them together and make this dense point cloud that then you can render, and you get this 3D model. And as you can see, there's the house, and you can see some of these trees. There probably aren't as good photographs of these trees, so they're not as well modeled as the main house right here is. And then this down here is more of a simplified version of the 3D modeling. This is done in SketchUp. It's much more of a simple model of a house. But I'm going to show you how 3D models can kind of be used in conjunction with regular 2D modeling and historical records. So this is a 3D model that was done using a point cloud. And you can see it shows materials really well. It shows textures on the stone, on this wood. You can see the textures really well. And it also is great for showing condition. So you can see the broken boards here. And then you can also see in the background, they have the 2D drawing. And you can still see the broken boards and things like that, but you don't get the same texture as you do with a 3D modeling. So it adds that extra layer of documentation, which is very important. And then let's see here. This is another one that shows more of a landscape view. So this is actually a model that I created in college that shows my family's original historic tobacco farm kind of compound. Most of these buildings are not standing. The only one that still stands is this kind of center house right here. So all the other ones are actually modeled, and I made them from oral histories from my relatives or from, we have some cool little drawings that somebody made a long, long time ago, and I actually reconstructed them from that. But then when you put it on the cultural landscape, you can start to see how these buildings kind of relate to the landscape around it. You can see where they kind of they lay on the outside of these agricultural fields. And then the main complex is right here, more in this green area. So it's really cool to kind of see that with the landscape. And then finally, this is an example of how 3D modeling can be used with historical records. So this right here is it's a mutual assurance policy, which is basically like fire insurance. It was drafted, this policy is from 1796, I think. And this is for a house that no longer stands in downtown Fredericksburg. But then from what the information is given here of the description of these buildings, you can actually build them and reconstruct them to kind of pop out of this little mutual insurance policy, which is super cool. And again, it gives more information and more capabilities to these historic records than just having the historic record. You can actually see the models kind of pop up, and it's super cool and interactive. So, okay, so how is Montpelier kind of doing this whole digital preservation thing? So with preservation being kind of new, there was this kind of idea that what if we took records that need to be digitized and made them accessible through a 3D model and through a 3D like landscape. As I'm sure most of y'all know, a lot of the archaeology records are already in this kind of 3D landscape. A lot of y'all have helped to work on that project. So kind of want to do the same thing with architecture. So let's step back and think about, why do we have all these records to begin with, and why do they need to be digitized? So the restoration happened from 2002 to 2008, and it was a huge project, and it was extremely controversial at the beginning, mainly because we did not know how much of the Madison House was there. When the DuPonts bought the property around 1900, they greatly expanded the house. They took it from 22 rooms to 55 rooms, added wings on both sides. They added a gym in the cellar, like really altered not only the house, but the landscape also. So when the property was left to the National Trust and talks of restoration kind of started up, they didn't really know if the Madison House was still there. And it came to this problem of, how do you remove history to get to a history that you don't know is still there? Because the DuPont House was historically significant in its own right. It was over 50 years old, which is the classification to be a historic house. And Marion DuPont Scott was revolutionary for women in the equine industry. The DuPonts were very significant in the local community. So how could you justify tearing off the DuPont House to get to the Madison House? And this led to a 2-year investigation period, which is where a lot of our records do come from, is from that investigation period. They basically did archaeology in the walls of the house. So they would cut units in the walls and kind of peel off the layers by layer by layer by layer until they got to Madison material. And what they found after that 2 years was that the Madison House was there. About 80% of it was. The DuPonts had actually just encased it within their own house and then added to it. And they were very frugal also. They would take Madison material and move it around the house. They moved walls around, doors around, windows around. So it was all there. They just had to find it. So besides cutting units in the wall, they also did paint analysis throughout the house. They did nail hole investigation, floor tack investigation. So there were a lot of reports coming out of this phase of the restoration. So at that point, the restoration got the green light. And 6 years later, $24 million, we had the Madison House back. So there was supposed to be kind of like this phase after the restoration where they did report writing and got all this stuff organized, but it just didn't happen because they ran out of money. Like, it pretty much shut down one day and everything got thrown into boxes. So the hundreds and thousands of records that came out of this restoration were packed up and sent off to O&M, where they would live the next 20 years of their life. So that's where I kind of come in. So the grant, actually, no, hold on. So the question becomes, what good are records if no one can find them or if they're not organized in a useful way? At that point, it's not like you even have them, because if staff can't even find them or know how to find anything within them, they're not useful, and much less could the public use them. So at that point, it's almost no good to have them. It's almost like you don't have them. So that's when the IMLS grant came into play, and when we really started to think about digitizing our records. So we got the funds from IMLS, and then the restoration, all to digitize all the records from the restoration. And then the model was built in combination with IAF at UVA and the Center for Advanced Spatial Technology at the University of Arkansas. And it was originally built in 3ds Max, and then we house it in GIS Online to make it publicly accessible. So the model is completely accessible. Unlike most archives, it's completely accessible to the public, and that's been one of the main things, is for it to be completely accessible. So even right now, like any of y'all could go on the model right now with me and look through it. But this is when I kind of come into the scene. I come in January of 2021, and I vividly remember my first day and being taken down to the Pony Barn basement and being shown racks of archival boxes, all labeled restoration material. There were about 50 boxes, and they were kind of like, here you go. Look through all these records. So I came in with very little knowledge of the restoration, and I learned the house and the restoration through looking through all these boxes. And I very quickly realized that not everything in these boxes actually relate to the restoration. Towards the end of the restoration, before kind of all the money kind of dried up and everything got packed up, they were also kind of working on Gilmore, and like the front gate was kind of happening. So there was a lot of other things kind of going on that kind of got all mixed in together. So I would go through each box. I would sit on the floor, put a box in front of me, and I would look at every piece of paper. And I would look at that paper and be like, is this from the main house? Like, is this from the mansion? And if it was, I would put it with the rest of in a box. And then I would organize out all the other stuff. So there would be like Gilmore and Center for the Constitution, mechanical stuff. So all that stuff that didn't relate to this project, I would sort out. And then I would take all the main house restoration records, and then I would sort those by room number. So every room in the house has a specific room number. For example, the dining room is M, stands for Madison -105. It's the 5th room on the 1st floor. And then John Payne Todd's room is room M200. So they have these numbers, and the numbers correlate to where they are within the house. So then after I did that, I would break it down even farther. I would go through all the room number files, and I would break them down by element number. So every element, every architectural element in every room has an individual ID. And we use that ID, it's very, very important. We use it to link it to stuff in the model. So everything has to be tagged with an element ID to be linked into the model. So that was created through like keyword. It would be like, so the chimney piece in the drawing room is CP, stands for chimney piece 108, which is the room number. Or the northmost window in the dining room would be W for window 105-1. So everything kind of has a number that kind of correlates to where it is in the house. Oh, and before I get to that, so what I was finding in these boxes was a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff that didn't even relate to anything. Some of it was grocery list, or you know, cups or doodles that people made during meetings. And this is my favorite record that I came across in any of the boxes. This is a doodle that was made on the back of a report. Somebody must have got bored in a meeting, and they doodled the Oscar Mayer Wiener. So, you know, I was coming across all kinds of things in these boxes, not just serious restoration records. It was, and I think this kind of shows, it brings humanity to the restoration. Sometimes I tend to think about the restoration as like this very serious event, and everybody took it like seriously all the time. And, you know, there was, but these people, the people working on the restoration are human. They had fun. They had hard days. They had good days. They had bad days, you know, and sometimes they got bored in a meeting and drew the Oscar Mayer Wiener car. So, you know. So the next big chunk of records that I had to go through were the photographs. So the restoration was heavily photographed. Every single day they had staff out taking photos of what was going on. So we have close to 100,000 images that needed to be tagged with relevant information because they're not useful. Nobody's going to sit through and search through 100,000 images to find what they're looking for. It would take so long, trust me. I have been through all 100,000 photographs, and I have tagged them with things such as room number, element number, restoration phase. Restoration, there are about 6 phases to the restoration. We got it broke down into, it's the investigation, removal phase, restoration, fabrication, installation, and then the final image of any object. So this really taught me what the house like through all those phases, because it's kind of, I have floor plans for the DuPont house, I have floor plans for the Madison house, but I do not have floor plans for what the house looks like in between those phases. There's definitely probably around like 06 where it's no longer the DuPont house, it's no longer the Madison house, and things are just everywhere. And it gets very tricky to kind of figure out where it is. So I learned to use context clues a lot. So for instance, in this image right here, this one's a pretty easy one because they're working on a staircase here. This would be labeled installation because they're installing the new staircase. And so the staircase really narrows it down to where it can be in the house. And then I know that there are only a few completely rebuilt chimney pieces in this house. So I know that that has to be one of the rooms where the chimney breast was gone. And then there's a door right here, which means it narrows it down to this is one of the rooms in the original 1764 part of the house. So that kind of gets me down. I can label this with a room number. I know what stair this is. And then that's kind of how I organized and tagged all these photos for months on end. And then we have video footage. So along with photos, the video footage is also super interesting. So there's video footage of the workmen working, things getting removed, demolition, interviews. The interviews were super fun to listen to the craftsmen kind of talk about what they were very proud of, what they thought was really hard, why they liked working on the restoration. So it really gave me insight to what the people working during the restoration actually thought of the restoration at the time. So these were actually done on little mini cassette tapes, which is a really outdated form of documentation. So we desperately need to get those sent off to get digitized so we can actually access them on a computer. And then each videotape holds about an hour of footage. And then I would actually go in and chop those down because it wouldn't be one continuous hour of footage of one thing. It would be like 10 minutes of Bill working on a baseboard, and then like 30 minutes of Wayne Mays plastering a column, and then another 45 minutes of them cleaning the floors in John Payne Todd's room. So it kind of jumped all over the place. So those need to be cut down so they can be tagged and then also inserted into the model so that people can have access to that. And then CAD drawings. CAD drawings are very important because they are basically what the workmen used to build and restore the house. They would have been drawn by the restoration engineer at the time or architect. And we have about 900 digital CAD files. And then I found about 400 paper CAD files in the Pony Barn that I cleaned out. A lot of those were duplicates, so they just need to be weeded out, make sure that they didn't actually need to be digitized. But these are very important to have digitized because let's say a problem goes on in the house and we need somebody to come in and fix it and they're asking for original CAD drawings. You don't want to be searching through all these paper drawings to find exactly what you need, especially if you need it quickly. So it's much easier to be able to have those digitized and tagged so you can easily go in and find what you need and download it and give it to whoever's doing the work. Okay, so let's get into the model. Get that to load up. So the great thing about our model is it has a lot of information in it. So it can be a little overwhelming at first, but you can actually go in and turn on and off what you want to see and what you don't want to see. So let me kind of get over here to our main house. Give it a second to get up and going. It takes it a few minutes to generate sometimes. Let me go ahead and turn some of this other stuff off so maybe it'll generate faster. Okay. Okay, so now we can see our cute little main house right here. So the great thing is the house is broken up in the model by layers. So there's the roof, the second floor, the first floor, and then the cellar, and then the exterior. So if you want to explore the model, you can actually turn these different layers on and off. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the roof, and then we can kind of look down into this, the second floor here. And as you can see, everything's modeled. We have the the chimney pieces, doors, windows, it's all there. Even the texture of the wallpaper in John Payne Todd's room is there. You can see the little bees and stars. So we're gonna show you this first floor. Here's the first floor, and we're actually gonna come in here and take a look at this mantelpiece. Okay, so this is the access for all our archival material. So I can go ahead and everything's selectable. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this chimney piece right here, and it's going to take it a minute, but all the records are tagged to this model in this attribute right here, and see it's all tagged through this element ID CP108 chimney piece in room 108. And then every record that's related to this will also be tagged with that number. So then it can be added into the attribute table. So then you got the pre-restoration picture here. So you can click on that and that will open up. And then, and then you can keep scrolling down and see some of these other ones. You got investigation image where they're looking at those cut marks on that hearthstone, because they actually found the hearthstone in the cellar, and they were able to match it up to the bed, the cradle in the drawing room, so you can actually see that happening. And then, you know, there's the removal image and restoration image. All these images are kind of tagged in here. The fabrication of the some of the damaged area on the chimney piece had to be redone, so they had to refabricate some of that. The installation images, and then if you scroll all the way down, you have this other little chart right here. And this is where some of the other records will be tagged in. Right now we have only field notes and CAD drawings, and I'm still organizing some of the other footage and reports before I can get those in. But you can just click right here and it's going to take you to the Google Drive, which is where we're storing everything for right now. And you can click on this, and here is a PDF with all the field notes relating to that chimney piece. So you can scroll through and explore and see what they were recording. I think there's some cool drawings down here, but where they're taking measurements and measuring things out and making all these notes. This would have been done in the field by some of the architectural historians. Oh, like this one's a pretty cool little drawing where they're showing the firebox, the bed of the firebox right there. So that's super cool. And then you can also see all the CAD drawings. So if you click on that link, it's going to take you to where we have all the CAD drawings. So it's very easy to get to this stuff. And you can kind of flip through there and see all the specific measurements for the mantelpiece that was eventually put on. Okay, so when it comes to archives, I think this is a much easier way to experience an archive than traditionally. So traditionally, archives that are not digitized are very hard to access. They're typically not easy for the public to access either. Sometimes you have to go through a researcher or a historian to get information, or they're only open one day a week for 3 hours, and it's just hard to get there. But then when you think about other digital archives, a lot of times they use search engines, kind of like Google, to search through their records, which can be a little hard to use and ineffective, especially if you don't know what terms to use. For example, if our archive was set up that way and you wanted to know information about the chimney pieces and you searched, not chimney, chair rail, if you search chair rail, nothing would come up. Not because the main house doesn't have chair rails, or not because we don't have information about them, but because we called them surbases during the restoration, which is a historic term. But if you don't know that, a search engine archive is not very useful. So here you can search for records through visual use. So all you have to do is know what you're looking for and what it looks like, and you go in and click on it and find what you need. You don't have to know the technical terms for things. So I think that just makes it a little bit easier for the public to use our archive, and it's accessible all the time to anybody, no matter where you are. Okay, let's see here. And now I'm going to come back. I'm going to zoom out of the house and talk a little bit more about this landscape we kind of have going on out here. Let me turn all the other stuff back on. zoom out here. So as you can see, we have a lot of stuff on our landscape right now, but there's still gonna be so much more that can be added. So for most of our buildings, we have these kind of red squares going on. They're just gonna show the footprint of where our buildings are, but we really wanna get into 3D modeling those as well, because it just adds more to our landscape and we can start adding information to those, because we do have information about a lot of our other buildings on property, not as much as we have for the main house, but there are a lot of other information that can be tagged and can be useful. I have done a few basic models for the buildings in the South Yard. As you can see there, they're not as detailed as the main house, but they still show a digital representation of what these buildings look like. The way this is done is I build them in SketchUp, and then I use drone footage or drone imagery to actually put the textures on the side of the wall. So these doors and windows aren't actually in 3D, but for right now, they're used as a representation. And they also have, if you can click on them, and they also have an attribute table. They're empty right now, but we could eventually add information into them. And we're hoping to do this for all the DuPont buildings because there is a lot of information for them, and they are rapidly deteriorating just because we don't have regular maintenance on a lot of them. And if anything were to happen to any of them, for instance, if any of them caught on fire, it's nice to know that you have all the information in one place and you can easily get to it, and you don't have to search for it across multiple Google Drives accounts or multiple places on our server or in boxes in somebody's office. Like, it's nice to know that all the information is in one place and it's accessible and easy to get in case we have an emergency where we need to have that information. So this kind of leads me into how can you get involved? So I believe that everybody can be a preservationist. I think given the right tools, everybody can do preservation. Like, you don't have to have a formal education to do it. I think if you are going to an old coffee shop in a building in your local downtown that's historic, you are a preservationist because you are investing money in a business that then make sure that a historic building is maintained. So if you have old buildings, just make sure that they're being maintained, they're not falling down, have documentation if you want to. But this can teach you, if you come on this expedition, you can learn how to do actual HABS level documentation. So we will be doing a lot of field work. I think we're going to do documentation of some of the buildings at Tags Island on property, which is typically not accessible to visitors. So if you want to explore some of the other buildings on property, please come out with us. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to do photo documentation, measured drawings for both interior and exterior. We're going to do some short lectures on historic building technology, so you can learn some of the background in architectural history. And then I'm working on getting some guest speakers for the week or either leading up to the week. So it's going to be a really fun time, and I think it's going to be really great. And at the end of the week, we're going to do some basic 3D modeling of some of the buildings that we actually document during the week. So it's going to be a great time. We're going to learn a lot, and I highly encourage all of y'all to sign up if you want to learn more about preservation and see some of the buildings on property that don't really get a lot of light. So so I will turn it back over to Mary and Matt if anybody has any questions, but thank you all for coming and listening to me talk about my project.
Thanks, Tessa. Really, really appreciate it. It's good to get an overview of everything you've been doing and the opportunity to come out in March to do some of the recording of the buildings. That's super exciting. And what we're really excited about with the program is that's going to give us the chance to actually get some of the buildings into GIS. And then once they're in GIS, you can access them. Anyone can access them on the web. Like all the model that Tessa was working on is on the web. And Tessa, have you done the story map yet? That's kind of the user's guide for how to use the model?
No, I have not, but I will start working on that, and that will kind of show you how to work around the model and interact with all those different layers. So yeah, I need to work on that.
Cool. Yeah. Well, as soon as we get that one out, we'll send it to you. And if you want to look at the model that Tessa's been working on, and it has a lot of the archaeology.
I'll come look in just a second.
I put it into the link. So, and I think we got some questions
there's some questions in the chat. The first one from Robert Mason says, what kind of coursework did you do to learn all these GIS skills?
So I took one class in college on digital preservation, and that taught me AutoCAD, it taught me SketchUp and Agisoft. I learned GIS since I got to Montpelier. GIS has been a lot of learning on my own, and I did take a short crash course at U of R for that, but otherwise it's been a lot of trial and error. Luckily, Google is a great resource. You can Google pretty much anything you want to do, and it will show you some type of tutorial to it. So
excellent. And then Nilsson says, super job, Tessa. How is additional information added by the historic preservation staff as more is learned about the property?
Yeah, so additional information, it's actually very easy to add information into the model because it's all based on tables in the back end of GIS. So we actually, if I found something that I want to add, I just go in, I can make a new field for it and then make a CSV file of all the information. And as long as I have that element ID to tag it to, I can link everything in, or I can just, if it's like if I find new drawings of something, I can go and just drop it in the Google Drive, and then the link will update and it will be there. So it's very easy to add information. It's not as hard as you think it would actually be. It's pretty easy. So I'm hoping that moving forward, even more information can be added in, not just like architectural or archaeology, but maybe some of like the curation stuff, like historic DuPont images, I think would be really cool to have in there. Our historic mutual insurance policies, our inventories that were done, I think would be really cool to also add into the model once we move a little further down the road.
And Ben, you've got your hand up. You can go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Thank you, Matt. Tessa, great presentation. Are there any plans to leverage all of this giant trove of data into other products for the public, specifically virtual reality or augmented reality tools that people could use either at home or on a tour?
Yeah, so there have been some preliminary talks about VR and AR. Right now, I don't think it's super compatible with GIS, which is where we house everything, but hopefully moving into the future, maybe GIS's capabilities will move more in that direction. But as of right now, there isn't any huge plans. There's just been some little talks about it here and there.
How we're mostly doing that is through story maps, and I'll find a couple of story maps and put them into the chat. That's kind of the link that I'll just put into the chat, which is the main model that we work on with the 3D. Like Tessa said, it's a little cumbersome to use, but the story maps kind of give a guided approach. Tessa, I'll find some. I got some of your story maps up, and I'll put some of the links in.
Perfect.
We have another question in the chat of, do you ever use scanning LiDAR for documentation?
Not for anything I've done here at Montpelier. We use Matt, how was the model? Was the model just built from the CAD drawings?
Yeah, the model was built in 3ds Max from the floor drawings, and
Yes.
we do have some of the 3D scans in Sketchfab, like that's the program that Tessa showed early on. And we're gonna, like, I think Tessa, we get Will coming, or he scanned the attic, and he's gonna try to get that into Sketchfab, and then we could link that to the model.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the big problems we've been having is GIS doesn't like point clouds very much, and with LiDAR you get point clouds, so it becomes a little more cumbersome to get point clouds into GIS than just regular 3D models.
And then Tom Chapman wants to know if you found any previous drawings completed for Tags Island. Do you know if there's any drawings that exist for Tags Island?
I've heard rumors that there are drawings somewhere for like all the DuPont buildings. I don't think I know where they are. I found some drawings for some of the other DuPont buildings, but I haven't looked too hard into what's for Tags Island yet. So there might be some somewhere. I just don't really know where they are, which is why we need to find this stuff and get it in to a place where everybody knows where it is all the time, because it's very hard to find this stuff sometimes.
We've got that stuff. Tom directed me to it, and I'll show you that. Thanks, Tom. Tom actually helped oversee some of those drawings, and there were Mary Washington students, a number of them, which is great.
Any other questions that anyone has.
Oh, looks like Ben again. Ben.
Yeah. So obviously you're approaching this from the perspective of preservationists. How much of the archivist hat have you had to put on and make decisions around what file formats to store stuff in, where to store this stuff? Is this stuff going to be accessible? Can the files be read 20 years from now? I mean, it sounds like you're already having that problem with the videotapes.
Yeah, so I would say like the first year I was here, I was more of an archivist than I was a preservationist. I was trying to figure out what's the best way to sort this stuff, what's the best way to organize it, what's the best way to tag it for people to find it. And yeah, sometimes it is thinking about how do we store this long term. We have used several different things. We use Google Drive a lot because it's easily accessible for the public. We also use S3 a little bit. And then I do worry sometimes about the longevity of these things. Typically digital documents do last a lot longer than any physical documents. So there is that, but still they don't last for forever. There is still some digital decay within the data. And sometimes I do worry about, what if for some reason Google goes under and they take down our Google Drive just disappears, that's very rare that would happen, but sometimes that still pops into my mind. Like that's where all our stuff is. So I also keep backups of mostly everything. I might put it on Google Drive, but I also have hard copies of stuff on my desktop and on the server. So it's also backing up everything to make sure that we have it in case an emergency and Google for some reason goes down. But yeah, it's been a lot of trying to think like an archivist, even though I am a preservationist. But I do think that both those fields go hand in hand a lot of times.
One thing that we designed into the IMLS grant is to keep all the data granular. So like Tessa was talking about, if for some reason we wanted to change platforms from Esri to something else, having everything in like all the digital information, both as JPEGs, but also as text files, means we could import it into another type of software if need be. But I feel like if Google goes down, Tessa, there's gonna be a lot more problems than just our archive. Might be some horrible things have happened, and it's not worth even worrying about anything but survival. Well, does anybody else have any questions? What we'll do is we'll send a link out to the recording of the video, but then also some other links to some of the story maps that we've been working on, Tessa and the archaeology department for this project. So, and also we'll send out Tessa, do you have a flyer on the program that you've created?
Yes, and I can send that to you.
That would be awesome. And we'll CC Dig, and if you're interested in signing up for the program Tessa's doing, you can go ahead and do that. It's going to be a lot of fun.
I think I see a question in the chat about how many participants we're going to have on the Stuart Press expedition. Mary, do you remember what we set the cap at for that expedition?
12 is what we set the caps at for the majority of our programs, is right at 12. So it's a lot of really good hands-on, close attention, a real specialized curated experience.
Oh my goodness, and I see there's a former field school student, Laura Hazeltine, and she remembers staying in Tags Island. I think in the 2005 program, we did some emergency fix up in one of the houses because we were kicked out of the village. Cool. Yeah, and if Ben, you got another question.
Yeah, one last question. And this is both for Tessa and for Matt. What is the one thing going through all of these materials, the one thing that you kind of like, besides the Wienermobile, like sat back and said, wow, this is really a needle in a haystack I've found here?
Oh. I really think it's the I wrote a story map actually about this, the faux graining on the newel post for the staircase. It was one of those times where they got really lucky to find the evidence for it, and reading those reports was super cool to figure out that they found it on a piece of they had tore out the newel post, they had chopped it up, and they had used it to build the pilaster on the front porch when they expanded the portico. And it was one of those times where I was like, there's no way like they found this. Like that is so cool. And I would say the other one I think is the mantelpiece in the dining room. That mantelpiece was actually found by a local man in Orange, that his grandparents actually worked for the DuPonts, and the DuPonts just gave it to him, and it had been sitting in his barn out in the county of Orange for years and years and years. And he heard about the restoration and was like, hey, I have a Madison mantelpiece. And they were like, are you sure? And they went out there, and sure enough, it was the mantelpiece. And then they could actually find the correct location for it off the nail holes in the back of the mantelpiece. And it correlated with the nail holes in the nailer for the dining room mantle. And I think stories like that are super duper cool. And I think getting like nothing like that can be found, I think, sometimes at other sites. Like these are incredible finds that couldn't have happened without the work of everybody at Montpelier and without like the Orange community as well. And I think it's very important that these stories get their time to shine and their time to be available to the public, because they've spent so much of their history kind of boxed away in storage units. So I'm really proud to work on this project and get some of those really cool stories out to the public.
Tessa, there's another one that relates to the program you're doing, which is during the restoration, John Jeans and the restoration architects started to discover that in the fabric of the DuPont buildings that were built in 1902 to 1903, when the main house had the additions put on it, we started finding in houses across the property thresholds for doors that had been taken from the main house and built into buildings that were being built at the same time. And a really cool one is during the there needed to be some work on the bowling alley, the little wings that are on it, and the joists that were used in there were the joist from the ceiling joist from the 1810 additions that showed the evidence for how the guttered roof was designed, which was just mind-blowing. And the architects had no idea how to design that until they found that in the bowling alley. So some things never left the property. You just had to look around. So maybe when you're exploring the buildings as part of the expedition, never know, could find, and especially you doing this with all the knowledge you have of the restoration, you could see a trim profile and be like, wait a minute, this could be Madison fabric. So
yeah, so I believe there are so many things in the restoration that were just happy accidents that really informed huge things. Like the house would not be near as complete without all these happy little accidents that happened along the way. But it is because the team worked so hard and the team worked together to make it happen.
Thank you.
Well, Tessa, thank you so much for preparing this presentation for us. It's great to hear about your work, and a great holiday gift for everybody to listen to. So thanks so much. And if you have any questions, you could direct them to Dig or to Tessa, and we'll send out an email with the link to this recording, and again some of the links to some of Tessa's favorite story maps that she's done. And I put the faux graining, I captured that one, found the link for that one, and put that into the chat. That's a really cool one. So, but and Tessa, it'd be cool if you, like, for some of these, you've got the model in here about where some of these objects are. That's awesome. You've been going back and editing these, Tessa. This is great. So that's the fun thing about story maps, is they continue to evolve. So good stuff. So All right. Well, thanks everybody, and have a wonderful holiday. You all be safe, and look forward to seeing you in 2023 out here with all the programs that Mary was talking about at the beginning. Mary's been working on some great programs for us for this next year.
They're great last minute Christmas gifts for that person that has everything. So they don't take up any space in your closet. So
give the gift of Montpelier.
Exactly. Hope to see you all in 2023.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.